Same. Right, afternoon everyone. Hopefully you can hear. I don't know whether an advert is interrupting me or not. Welcome to the agenda. And I'm joined by Mike Dicks today because Graham is eating birthday cake. It's his birthday.
Having a birthday.
He is. He's had
How
the
old is
nerve.
he?
He's had the nerve. I don't know. He's a little bit younger than I am, and I'm 40. Hang on, I have to think about that. I'm 48.
Bless
So
him. He's still
he'll
having a
be
still having a party at
yeah,
his
he's
age.
mid-40s.
Bless him.
I know, exactly. But we're going to have a little bit of a discussion. Someone will have to tell me in the chat if you can hear this fine. We're going to have a little bit of a discussion about Trump, Starmer, geopolitics, essentially, in terms of where we go from here. Because we've both watched the discussions, press conferences, whatever you want to call it, between Trump and Starmer in various locations. And I mean, so what are your main takeaways on it from what you got from it, by the way? Let's just start with that.
I think the boy done good, didn't he? I was incredibly nervous because you just look at the characters of Keir Starmer and Donald Trump. You know, Starmer is no Macron, is he? You can't go there and do the boy hugs and stuff. And they're politically completely separate, and his voice is terrible, even though Donald Trump thought it was the most beautiful accent he'd ever heard, apparently. And I just thought, oh, come on, Keir, I hope you get this right. And it turns out he played a blinder. Like, I think, there's a lot of stuff that is not, it's going to be in the detail, isn't it? And it's going to depend on what happens with Zelensky today. But I think between him and Macron, they've set Trump up with some fairly simple little easy traps, like, would you like to come to a party with the king? And Trump just fell into the hole.
Yeah. I mean, for me, because it's difficult for me to say it was successful because we know Trump is like a more extreme version of Boris Johnson, and Boris Johnson was known to quite easily change his mind. You would get him to agree on a thing, and then you'd leave the room, and then half an hour later he's changed his mind because someone else just whispered in his ear. Trump is
depending on
like
the
that.
last person that spoke to him.
Anything, and and Trump was he wasn't really firm on
it
things.
Feels to me like Macron and Starmer actually worked this one out.
Oh, they
because
definitely have.
They've been talking every day, and it's like, so you see Macron, then you see Keir, then you see Zelensky, and then you make an announcement that's going to be difficult to back away from.
Hopefully.
And it just feels like Trump's language has shifted from he's a dictator and
that definitely did.
Leader.
He had to deny ever saying it.
Yeah, I never said that. Basically, yes, you did. It's writing.
Yeah, at the same time, I'm not going to make a fuss about it. If he's going to now say he's not a dictator, that's a win.
I think that's where you have to get your faith from in this, is that Trump is perfectly capable of, flipping and saying, black is white and white is black. And you got to hope that he gets flipped that way. But then I still think Starmer stood up to J.D. Vance.
Oh, he did.
I think, he made it clear what our position was in all of this, and he wouldn't even let, journalists provoke him over Canada and stuff like that. So it's a pretty good job, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just for those who didn't see it, so the J.D. Vance thing, he was trying to chime in with like freedom of speech. Now, these are the people who are banning journalists from the Oval Office to ask Trump questions because he doesn't like their questions. There's another one who probably got banned last night because Trump sort of had to interrupt one on that Canada question. And the other thing that was announced earlier this week, so Trump has sent out an order that all government employees, agencies, everything, have to cancel subscriptions to 6 news outlets, which includes the likes of the New York Times, Bloomberg. And so, I mean, where's the freedom of speech there? Where is the freedom of speech? That is as blatant controlling of the narrative as you can imagine. And Starmer thought, he said, we have had free speech in this country for a very long time, and we are going to have it for a very long time to come. So he was taking no shit. And Trump also did the same thing he did with Macron. With Macron earlier this week, he said, because he's trying to justify his extortion of Ukraine. And he was saying, well, Europe just gave them loans. They'll be getting that money back. So should we. And Macron said, no, mate, most of it was like stuff we just gave them. And he did the same thing again yesterday. And Starmer again said, No, there were some, but most of what we gifted them was a gift. We're not getting it back. We don't want it back.
Yeah. I don't know what effect that has. I mean, Trump seems to manage with those corrections on
Oh
camera,
yeah.
but what does he do when he leaves the room? Is he fuming about that stuff? Who knows? But
If he is, he'll be
you
fuming
know,
at his advisors, because we're told by Sir Kim Darroch, for example, who was the UK ambassador to the US when Trump first became president, that one of the things you have to do to him is you do have to stand up to him. You can't actually look subservient to him. You do have to stand up to him. You obviously have to be diplomatic. That doesn't mean to say the same as like call him a dickhead or anything. We don't know what happened behind closed doors. So the big issue at the moment, so in terms of like what Starmer got out of him for Britain, that was fine so far, as long as he doesn't change his mind. So first of all, I'll note, Trump was giving every impression that he really wanted to use the threat of tariffs to drive a wedge between Britain and the EU, and the fact that our foreign policy is officially, and has been since Labour came to power, EU are the priority in terms of foreign policy. So that went. I didn't hear any sign of him trying to suggest that he doesn't like the fact that we're working closely with the EU. In fact, ironically, that's what we have to do in terms of this security agreement.
well, Trump's opened the door on that, hasn't he? He's basically
Yes.
saying we're not going to put any troops on the ground in Ukraine, but we want your minerals.
Yeah.
And Ukraine's saying, well, we need some security guarantees, and Europe's going, yeah, we'll do that. It's okay.
So we have to work together on that one. So that's disappeared. He's talking about a future trade agreement, and just to be clear to people who think the trade agreement in terms of the lower food standards and NHS and all the rest of it, that's gone. From what they were saying yesterday, they're talking about basically a tech agreement. Now,
which
there
makes sense
are
because of
yeah.
I mean, Google, Facebook, Twitter, they've all got locations in London. Even
Musk has
Google in
opened
particular,
a new one up specifically for AI in London. Now, I mean, here's the thing: like, there's a lot of people at the moment, rightly, I'm a bit concerned about the lack of guardrails on the development of AI, because it's really taken off now, and protecting data, protecting copyrights, things like that are really big issues that Labour are not talking a good fight on. But in the context
I mean, I'm only going to defend a friend here, basically. I know Peter Kyle is the MP for the next constituency to me, where I used to live. And I know he's doing a lot of work there on AI. I've got this, after yesterday's press conference, I came away thinking, well, if they've driven towards the AI side of things and the development of that technology, it's almost like a reverse. I don't know if you know the story of the Enigma machines after the Second World War, that we obviously unlocked the code of the Enigma machines, and we just passed that on to America as we always do with technology. But we also went to a number of our partners around the world and said, hey, these Enigma machines are great for encoding your messages. Why don't you use them? And everybody started sending messages on a system that we knew how to decode for about 10 years until they realized that they were shit. So you kind of think, if we do a deal with America on AI and we just let a load of British people learn about the pace of development with all the investment coming from America, and then we just go, all right, we're just going to flip the switch. Once Trump decides he's a dictator, we'll keep all these people. We're just going to build our own AI system. In fact, we've been doing it for the last 10 years, basically.
So I like the sound of that. I'll tell you, my caution is that we have not for a very long time been very good at keeping innovation in this country. No. There's the famous developer of the hovercraft, got nothing for it. But there was also a very recent example. There's a kid who's doing his GCSEs, except they're sort of on hold now, who's come up with literally $1 million idea. He's come up with this idea. Silicon Valley, a company in Silicon Valley bought it. And everyone's going, isn't this marvellous? We've got this British kid. And let's be honest. Now, I remember, you must have done it. I don't know. So I remember when I was a kid, we learnt programming. We learnt, it was
absolutely.
BBC Micro, we learnt programming. And I remember partway through comprehensive school, those lessons just stopped. Now, I didn't find out at the time what it was about. Well, that was a bit later. But But I found out from an older colleague, because I was a teacher, I found from an older colleague what had happened there. And basically what happened is Margaret Thatcher had said to industry, what do you want to teach our kids? They said, well, just teach them how to use the systems. So that's why IT replaced programming. And then what we did have, we were never going to, I suppose, really compete with America, but we did have a world-leading computing industry.
We had a generation. I mean, I was involved in that industry at the time. That's how old I am. And we had a generation that knew how to code. And we created the best computer games in the world. We still do, to a great extent. Grand Theft Auto is, it's a UK game. But and it was because we taught a generation of people who are now in their 50s and 60s how to actually code. And they built, in the back of game shops, they built up these businesses, and then they went on into industry. And you're right, Thatcher did a deal with Microsoft. It was a lobbying deal with Microsoft, who wanted everybody to learn Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And now we have a generation of people that know how to use PowerPoint. And don't understand how that's coded.
I can tell you as a teacher,
exactly.
The kids hate it when you use. I mean, it's a perfectly serviceable tool. I use it, but it's like, the PowerPoint. But
having just spent half an hour wrestling to try and get a Microsoft webcam working with my Windows 11 update that they've just done at me, they're not the best company to take over the world with.
But that was the problem. So a lot of people are going, how marvelous it is for this kid to have come up with this brilliant idea. Is only GCSE age, and it's absolutely fantastic, particularly when you consider he's hardly had the formal education for it. But my response to that is, but who's going to profit? An American company, because we cannot keep innovation in this country, and that's
it's
my
about
concern.
Investment. It's about the investment. It's about the money, and for me, I mean, and this leads on to a lot of the implications of yesterday. I think, I think yesterday marks a moment where we are going to have to readdress our relationship with Europe and America and the rest of the world. Everything is shifting around like a risk board to work out who owns what now and where our influences are. And the problem with tech has always, look at what we've got. We've got an oligarchy of tech bros in America now, who all of them were standing there at the inauguration, Bezos and Musk and Zuckerman. And the ones that none of us can remember their names, but all of them were stood there because that's where America makes all of its money on a global level nowadays, and they get the political control from that as well. And ultimately, we need to build an alternative to that for Europe. We can't do it just as Britain. It's too big a task, and you need the numbers. And Europe needs to start looking at that. It needs to start looking at its defense. It needs to build an alternative to NATO without America. It needs to build an alternative to the United Nations without America, the World Bank without America, because they're not our friend anymore. They're, as the Canadians describe them, you're no longer our friend, you're our neighbor. Basically. And we don't trust our neighbor in this situation.
Well, I mean, in this particular case, of course, Canada, if this trade war blows up, will have to turn. And in fact, it seems open about this to the EU. It's already, has a good trade agreement with the EU. Obviously,
it has a border with Greenland.
It has the same problem we have with Brexit, in that geography does matter. You can move car parts between Canada and America overnight. You can't do that between Canada and Europe. But at the same time, it's still we're still going to end up with strengthened trade. I mean, Trudeau has said he wants to restart trade talks with the UK as well.
And I think more importantly,
have to miss out the sticking points from last time.
I don't know if you've seen, I kind of hope that Mark Carney gets the gig leading the Liberal Party in Canada. He's been talking a lot on American chat shows recently because he's doing his campaigning in the States for the Canadian job. And his view is very simple, that, America is no longer our friend, and that's a shame. But here's my plan for how we'll do this. And he's talking about overtures to Europe via the UK. I think that's one of the strengths. I mean, this is going to be very unpopular in the chat and probably with you, but ultimately, I think yesterday demonstrated a Brexit bonus for us, finally, that we are in a position that we're not Europe and we can actually negotiate with Trump on our own terms, whereas he can't do that with anybody else in the EU at the moment. He'd love to do a deal with Macron, but not Merz, maybe, or whatever. He'd love to do a deal with Italy, but not anybody else. In our case, we can actually go, okay, we're going to negotiate, but we keep coming back home and talking to Macron and Merz and everybody else and saying, let's make sure this works for all of us. I think there's some strength in there if they handle it well.
Yeah,
I think there's
there
a lot.
is. I'd still rather have the 40 billion quid in the Treasury's coffers every year.
Of course.
There's a huge super chat just coming from JVNR, £50. Thank you very much.
Oh wow,
That'll
thank
buy
you,
a lot of
Joby.
birthday cake. It says, do you think the rise of the far right in the EU is worrying? So, what do you think first?
Well, I mean, in Germany, we've seen almost the effect, the opposite effect that Musk hoped for by Musk stepping into German politics. The AfD didn't do as well as everybody was predicting they would do. They did all right, but they're definitely not going to form part of the government.
No.
And it's an incredibly East European thing. Have you seen the map of East Germany versus West Germany in voting? And East Germany all voted AfD,
Yeah, well,
and West Germany
that's where it's
voted for
come
all the other
from,
parties.
effectively from, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's the irony of Putin saying that Europe and Ukraine is run by Nazis. You go, well, hang on. It looks like East Germany wants the Nazis back as much as anything else. And yeah, is it Meloni, Italian's
Yes, Italy,
premier,
Giorgia Meloni.
comes in as a Nigel Farage type character and then settles into European politics in a reasonable way.
Well, they're in a bit of, at the moment, she's trying to scale back independent judiciary. So
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be right wing nut job
she
stuff
has,
that she does.
she's certainly changed her attitude towards Russia, I think.
I think the interesting thing, just in terms of Musk's intervention with the AfD didn't work. It backfired on him because of the timing of what he's doing in the States. Yeah. Look at Canada and their election upcoming again. I think it's such an important election heading our way. The opposition leader in Canada is a younger, much more attractive Farage character who's up Trump's arse. And they're backfiring once Trump started talking tariffs, etc. The whole of the Canadian nation comes together and says, no, you keep your nose out of our politics, basically.
Try and find it. But I was looking. Have you seen? I mean, the latest opinion polls in Canada are really quite something.
So it's shifted enormously,
massively.
Considering that it looked like the Liberal Party was going to go disappear for a decade, basically. It switched over completely into a.
I mean, so for those, let me just try and describe it rather than just put it up on the screen. So for those who can imagine it, so the Conservatives riding high very, very recently, the Liberals declining very, and it's just the Liberals have completely shot up now.
Yeah.
The new Democratic Party have sort of declined. As I think all that's happened there is I think a lot of voters are now switching to the Liberals as the ones to beat the Conservatives because the Conservatives got behind Trump and MAGA.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then stunningly unpopular.
It's the thing about populism, isn't it? And nationalism in particular, is that it works both ways.
Yeah.
That if you start slagging off a country, then the people will actually all get together and go, no, sod it. You keep out of this. And I think yesterday, that's one of the other things that Starmer did brilliantly. Again, controversially, somebody in the chat mentioned that we've had a resignation today over the funding
Annalise
for this.
Dodds,
for the defence increase. And, the decision to take the money from overseas development is obviously, to me, a play to Trump to say we're taking money from poor African kids and we're going to buy some more American weapons. Are you happy with me now, sir? That's what Trump wanted to hear. It shuts down Badenoch. It shuts down Farage. They've got absolutely nowhere to go with this because both of them suggested that's what we should do. So, arguably it's a bad thing. I was looking at the press conference yesterday going, oh, geez, Keir, is that what you've got to do? Oh, God, no, really? Have we really got to sell out our Labour left-wing principles so much? But we didn't sell out. We didn't shut down the NHS, did we?
No. I mean, the other thing as well about the international development, I mean, I'm not hopeful about it, but there's a difference between the international aid budget and international aid programs because, so our international aid budget was increased to 0.7% of GDP by the last Labour government. The Conservatives maintained it and then they cut it under Boris Johnson and said, oh, but we'll get it back when we can. But they didn't just cut it down to 0.5% from 0.7%. They then also started to spend it in this country. So it wasn't even international development. So the massive mounting costs of accommodation for asylum seekers because they wouldn't process asylum claims.
It was paying the hotel bills in Brighton, wasn't it?
So our foreign aid budget is being, or over a quarter of it is being spent in this country, and which makes no sense. So there's a sense in which Labour have said they're actually. I mean, we know they didn't sound confident, and we know that there's probably going to be some cuts to some budgets, maybe, but they were talking about the fact that some of those savings could come from that. Now, my issue with that is what they'd have to explain to me is they'd already planned to reduce the amount of spending on that. So wasn't that also taken into account in the budget?
I think there's some smoke and mirrors going on here in general.
There always is. I mean, politically, I don't understand, for example, why they didn't just the money where the economic aid we're providing to Ukraine. Why didn't that just get classed into the budget and make it look like it's higher than it is?
Well, did you see, just tangentially, that I was watching The Rest is Politics with Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart, and a question came in about Abramovich's money from the sale of Chelsea. And they just asked what's happened to that money. There was £3 billion there, and it was allocated by Boris Johnson's government to be spent on humanitarian support in Ukraine. And it turns out that money is sitting in the bank. It's not been spent. And it's not
legal difficulties.
No. Abramovich said you can have that money, and as long as it is spent on humanitarian relief, and the government has just never spent it. And then it was put to David Lammy, why hasn't this money been spent? And Lammy went, I don't know, I'll have to go and find out. Right. Basically. So there's money sitting around all over the place that they can draw on. It feels to me like when Trump fucks up the next bit with Putin, which he will, those assets are going to be released in some way, shape or form. And I think maybe Reeves is relying on that.
Maybe. Because, the other thing to bear in mind is that this is beginning in 2027. If the economy grows more than anticipated, it is possible. I would suggest the fact that Dodds has resigned means that she's not confident. And she's an economist as well. But it is possible that... I suppose the problem is that even when you announce there are going to be cuts in 2 years, like the program still end up being wound down or something, which is the problem.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, anyway, the other thing the Labour Party didn't do was re-establish the International Development Department. So it's still part. Yeah, it's still part of the Foreign Office. So, Dodd's resignation is, I think, is almost a play for the main Labour Party. It's so that we're still saying, yeah, this is morally wrong. What we've done is wrong. We've had to do that in order to have. I sound like the biggest optimist for Keir Starmer that I come across. Normally, I'm very cynical about what they're doing, basically. But it just feels to me like in that situation, I don't know what else I'd have done. I think the only other thing I'd have done is introduce a tax on the arms industry in the UK to say, hey, if you're going to get all this business, we're going to put a windfall tax on you.
Yeah, basically. You can introduce a levy on something.
VAT on missiles, basically, because you wouldn't be getting this business if it wasn't for the fact that Trump's fucking us over here. So, maybe give us an extra 20% of tax.
Special levy for it, I think. And that's what I did think, because if... Because there was various things they could, in theory, have done, and they did all have downsides. All of them have downsides. But yeah, a levy for me would have been the first one.
It feels like to play to the left better. It would have been, let's tax some rich people here. Yeah. Let's find somebody in here that's benefiting from all of this and take some tax. And I think that is the right way to do it. But fundamentally, that politically would have backfired on them, because Farage would be the next guy into the White House saying, well, we'd have done it differently. And I think the primary thing was shutting down the opposition in the UK, and shutting down Trump and Musk's and Vance's opposition to the UK at the same time. And it turns out that an invitation to have tea with the King in Scotland is all you needed to do, really.
Well, of course, once it's done, then it's done. And then you're entirely reliant on him being... But I can see him being happy with the trade arrangements, because Labour wanted before Trump was, even at a time when it didn't look like Trump might win, or where some people didn't think that Trump would win. At that point, Labour was still on for like hugely boosting the potential for AI. So they were always going to need the companies that were able to deliver those services anyway. This was unfortunately already going to include some of the people around Trump. So from that point of view, he hasn't given anything up.
On that front, there's the problems that Ireland's having at the moment, in that a number of tech companies base themselves in Ireland in order to be in the EU because of the tax breaks that Ireland was giving them, and Ireland's in trouble with the EU for giving those tax breaks now. So suddenly, the techie companies, the American tech companies, are starting to look at alternatives. And here we are sitting on the edge of Europe, able to offer at least some access to that market. And probably a better tax haven for them. And I'm guessing that's we're ready. But to come away, I can't remember the last time an American president stood there and said, "We are looking forward to a trade deal with the UK. It's a priority for us, and we think it will be quite easy." Theresa May didn't get that. Boris didn't get that. None of the other prime ministers that we've had in the last 20 years, I think, have come away with that level of assurance that the president is working on a trade deal with the UK. There's a whole bunch of problems with having a trade deal with America, as we all know, but we don't have to buy their shit.
Yeah, exactly. if it's not, and it can easily be a trade deal that doesn't mean we have to lower standards or sell off bits of the public, or give away bits of our public services. So
any more of our public services.
No, exactly. So it still allows us to boost the state's involvement in public services, including the NHS. They were going to need to. There's no British tech companies that could have done what Labour need them to do anyway. It was going to be Elon Musk and people like that anyway.
And this way we get a bit of control over it, because we can set some terms of trade. We can set some terms of trade on how they trade with us. Basically,
we could get away with the tariffs. We could get away with the tariffs, and all we've had to do is we've had to sacrifice dinner with the king in Balmoral. Really.
Yeah, and then look at the other thing, which was put there by Farage and Badenoch as a trap for us, which was the Chagos Islands.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Trump just stands over in front of everyone and says, "No, I think it's a good deal."
Well, basically, it seemed a bit hesitant, but it was positive. So again, we have to hope he doesn't. Jovian's a bit flash today. He doesn't. We have to hope he doesn't have to. He doesn't change his mind. But if he doesn't change his mind, Farage in particular looks a tit, because my point is, Kemi Badenoch said it's a bad deal. Okay, she said it's a bad deal. Trump's not saying that. They're a difference of opinion. That's fine. Farage said it was bad because Trump hated it and it was driving a wedge between the US and Britain. Well, where does he go now? Because Trump seems positive about it. Starmer, clearly, from what we had yesterday, there's no wedge between them. Trump's very positive about the trade prospects. So someone should ask Farage, does he feel stupid now? Because it looks like he was the one trying to drive the wedge between America and Britain.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, I don't think the Chagos thing has really dug its claws into the vernacular anyway, is it? It's not really been part of the news agenda, despite not trying our hardest to make it. So, no.
You tell them, it's deal with Mauritius. What?
It's a little bit of empire that apparently we stole from the French. I didn't know this, basically, but it was originally French. Then we took it over, and then we rented half of it to America for the last 50 years. And all we're saying is, well, you can carry on renting it, but it's not ours. And as I keep saying, we should call it, it's the Tory Chagos deal, because it wasn't us that did it.
They did pretty much 3/4 of it. We just finished it off along the same lines as they were agreeing anyway. Anyway, Jovian R has put in another £50. Don't do that anymore, please, by the way, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Jovian.
It says, but can you take what Trump said about the trade deal seriously? Well, I think I said earlier, I can believe his motivation. He is someone who will say a thing one day and say another thing the next day when someone else whispers in his ear. But the people around him want it. That's the thing for me. Yeah. We're not giving anything away from it because Labour wanted it anyway. Whether Labour are right to want it is another matter. People would disagree. But they did want it, completely separate to anything to do with Trump. If Kamala Harris had been in the White House right now, Keir
We'd have
Starmer would still
expected that
want
deal.
something like that. So we're not
Yeah.
giving away anything extra. Trump's tech bros want it. It sounds to me like Trump can take it, is not into mutual benefit, but he can take it as a win. But at the same time, from our point of view, it's not a Trump win. So I don't really see, beyond
And I
the
think
issues people have with AI in general, just in trade terms and political terms, I don't see the issue.
no, no. I think we can trust him as long as we keep layering on the. You just got to suck up to the guy and praise his ego.
Oh yeah,
The
it costs
great.
nothing to
I,
flatter someone.
I come back endlessly to this brilliance of the King's Tea Party because they haven't agreed a date, and we hold that over Trump now, right? Because essentially we can say, okay, it was in September or whenever, and then we just carry on with all the things that we want to get them to do.
Yeah.
The humiliation for Trump of the King saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can no longer have you around for tea," is just hanging over his head, and the guy seems to be that simple. This Melania will be happy with me if we go for tea with the King and Queen.
Yeah.
And he's just driven by that.
Yeah, and it really is. I mean, if we can just keep doing things that are, from our point of view, relatively free, I would absolutely. I'm fine with that. I've seen various people. I saw someone last night going, "Oh, Keir Starmer's so far up Trump's arse," type of thing, and I said, "Yeah, how many British jobs has that cost us? How many British jobs did it cost us for him to do that? Nothing."
And I'm just guessing that person might be a Farage or a Badnock fan or whatever.
No, they weren't. There was someone on the left who's just disgruntled at the fact that we're sucking up to a fascist. But at the end of the day,
listen,
it's costing nothing to do it.
As it appears that I'm being Keir's cheerleader today, basically, which is unusual for me. But I totally get how frustrating it is that we're having to do this. But we're in a political global situation at the moment, which is incredibly delicate. And I'm so much happier that we don't have a Boris Johnson sitting there making these.
They would just concede everything. He would concede.
Yeah,
everything.
Exactly.
If Trump,
and then you've got the beauty of Mandelson wandering around Washington, whispering in people's ears endlessly, basically at the right parties now for the next 4 years. Yeah. And whatever we think of Mandelson is a slippery.
Politics is
political player, and he'll be loving his job. Over there, just constantly tweaking this and tweaking that. And we got another super chat there.
It's John C. £10. Thank you. It says, we used to have a ministry for overseas development, also in the days when the social contract was a thing in Labour cabinet meetings, which was downgraded to the OD admin by Thatcher. But then we did also have an independent office created by the last Labour government as well, which was then again downgraded by the next Conservative government.
I mean, it is honestly a shame that it's that budget that we're tapping into. It would be a tiny fraction of the pension budget if they just means tested everybody over £300,000 income or something. Basically, took away their levels. Whatever it is you're going to do, but whatever you were going to do to shave some money off to pay that budget, it was going to be harmful. And this one is politically expedient in the short term because Trump likes being mean to other countries.
And in all honesty, like I keep saying, it's unfortunate, but in terms of because we don't have a system where one vote, one person type of thing. We have a first past the post system, and the budgets that a lot of key voters resent. Anything to do with the Department for Work and Pensions, for example, although it was politically brave to means test the winter fuel allowance payments, nonetheless, there was broad public support for it. The most people who didn't approve of it are people of pensionable age, because average working people, these 40, 50-year-old key voters, they're working. So what do they get out of extra payments, pensions? Nothing. Same with benefits payments. They're working. What do they get out of it? Nothing. So people are a bit hard-nosed about it. And the same applies to foreign aid, because unfortunately, people are allowed to talk about it as if it's charity. And I keep trying. It's not. It's actually quite hard-nosed. There's nothing. It's not about giving starving kids food or anything like that. It's actually. And when people talk about the corruption in foreign aid sometimes, it's almost that's part of the point, because the point of foreign aid is to stabilise areas, which means. It's not a starving kid who's causing political instability in the world. It's actually the tyrannical warlord or something like that.
It's the
So
work of the CIA and MI6 and
yeah,
the military, but without bullets. There's a famous American general, I think, that said that for every dollar you cut from the overseas aid budget, I have to spend another dollar on bullets.
yeah,
So it's not charity work because a
it's
lot
not
of
at
it is
all.
just,
No,
can we please the
it's
leader of this unstable
yeah.
country by giving him a theatre next to his palace or something,
And
basically?
it is often that people think of it as charity and think of it as like anti-poverty things abroad, and sometimes it has that impact, but that's not what it's done for. It's done to stabilize areas, and the first people
Yeah,
who want us to chop foreign aid are the first people to complain when we get another boatload of refugees turn up, and it's
yeah,
like,
exactly.
but
Yeah.
we're spending the money to try and reduce that.
It was interesting. I heard on the radio the other day a representative of Cathode or Cathode, the Catholic Church
All right.
overseas aid charity, and she was brought on to talk about this cut in the overseas aid budget. And the interviewer said to her, "So how much do you rely on overseas aid money from the UK government?" And she said, "Oh, we don't have any. All of our money comes from the church, and we do all of our work anyway. And this isn't really going to affect us, but it's going to affect the political game in some of the countries that we
Yeah.
operate in." She was basically saying almost none of this money is paying for water and food and
No,
shelter
and
for the people that we're looking after.
and the same applies. I donate to the Red Cross, the International Red Cross, for example, and they do a lot of that work. So, but it is that was right. International aid is about stabilizing political stability.
And that will
For,
backfire on us
oh yeah,
in the next 10
if it
years. That
ends
is
up
going to cause us problems. Yeah.
like it's a trickle compared with like Doge pulling US aid, but yes, and it also allows China to step in and
Yeah.
improve their soft power, and they
Yeah,
will.
and I think that one of the areas we can't follow the states in is that Trump just got rid of a law that stopped American companies bribing their way into business abroad. Now we're not going to make that change. So in a way, the overseas aid budget from America is being switched over to Google to say, okay, you go build the theater for the dictator, basically, and we won't treat that as a bribe, and you won't be put in prison. Our CEOs are not going to have that advantage, so we're not going to get the business because we can't bribe anybody. I mean, it's all. I feel like I'm talking Tory bloody political points here, basically. Yeah, fuck the overseas budget. We don't care. It's fine. But I think it was just politically expedient yesterday. And the point with a lot of these, it's a bit like Trump. Do you actually have to do these things? Will anyone notice in a year's time if the overseas aid budget is about the same?
Or
somehow
even
we've
actually
jiggled
by
the
the end of
figures.
the Parliament is back up to 0.7%.
Yeah. It was just important to do that this week, basically.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I still worry about, because even if we dodge tariffs, that doesn't mean to say we dodge the economic headwinds.
No.
Trump, even if he doesn't start a trade war, I mean, he talks a lot about it, but he hasn't actually really done it yet.
Only with China, really.
China, we've got the tariffs on steel and aluminium, which is not as big a deal for us as it is, say, Canada or the EU. And he's threatened 25% tariffs on EU, so we'll see if that happens next week. But even if he doesn't do that, just tanking the American economy still hurts us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, I mean, trying to explain it, it's like we still sell quite a lot of stuff to America. And if he reduces their consumer power, they don't have as much to spend on our stuff as well as anyone else's. So
fundamentally, we are still suffering the repercussions of 2008 and the financial crash that was about mom and pop mortgages being wrapped up into weird bundles and sold as investments, and that's the American domestic economy having a dramatic effect on the rest of the world for the last 20 years. That's entirely why we're in the economic mess we are and the geopolitical mess that we're in. If they do what they're trying to do now and it backfires the way economists are saying it will, that's going to have a huge ripple effect across the world. The only difference, I think, is that this time Canada and us, remember Gordon Brown flying around the world in 2008, 2009 to fix this and helping America fix it. That ain't going to happen this time. No. We're not going to be trying to fix the American economy. No, we're going to be trying to separate ourselves from it as much as we possibly can.
And that's the problem. It's growing pains while you do that, because America is by far and away the largest economy in the world. The EU is comparable. It's on the same level. It's not as big, but it is on the...
If only we had a decent trade deal with them, that would be nice.
Yeah, if we're part of them.
Yeah, exactly.
But of course, you know, they also have less... They're less able to move agilely because they cannot speak with one voice, which is a strength.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it also means, really, this is always going to be a tussle between America and China. Someone just said there, so I think Campbell... So Alistair Campbell should be brought in to sort out Labour's comms. It's like, I'm not sure about that. I do think he'd be a lot better. And I know he's proven, but he's also proven in different times, because I think he would be infinitely better, and he would at least understand social media. He's proven himself there. But I do worry about the Arsene Wenger effect, in that he was a master at one time, but... would he be able to adapt to the completely different way of doing things, or would he fall back on his old ways, which wouldn't work these days because of that instant 24/7? And there was no social media when he was spin.
No, and I don't think he fully. In fact, they had a discussion on their most recent podcast about social media. And Rory Stewart is much more on top of what's going on than Alistair Campbell. I think he treats it purely as a broadcast medium, which is quite fair. I do as well to a great extent, but. No, I'm not sure he's the right man. He's the right man to have on the table, and I'm fairly certain he has the ear of Keir. I'm fairly certain of that. So you need him advising whoever's doing it, but we do need somebody that's got more of a global view and is part of Keir. But there's the problem. You know, whatever. I'm going to stop my singing Keir's praises. Front. You know, comms is appalling for this Labour government. Keir Starmer doesn't have whatever you think of Tony Blair, he had something that a narrative that drove him, and you could come back to that narrative with every single thing that happened in the world. With Keir, you know, he demonstrated clearly that he can just volte-face to make sure that we win yesterday. And when asked yesterday in the press conference, what have you got in common with Donald Trump? It's we like winning. Yeah. You know, that was it. That's all he said. And there's a story from the book about Keir Starmer's rise that came out last week, where he was despondent after the election win because he didn't win by as many seats as Tony Blair did. So it was literally just about the winning. And I think that's the big problem, is that comms can only do so much to spin somebody who isn't giving you a narrative to hook into. You know, and Keir's narrative is, I'm going to do a good job of this. Don't worry, everything's under control with an adult.
Yeah, but they don't understand. There is enough stuff. They've got stuff that they can throw out there. They don't actually have. They have a large communications team, and they have absolutely nobody who understands social media. Nobody at all.
Yeah. No simple narrative.
Maddening. And I keep saying, I mean, I can only talk about YouTube. Other people are experts on the other social media, but they're not good at any of them. You know, on YouTube, the Conservatives are blowing. Keir Starmer has his own YouTube channel, which means he was wanting to take it seriously. The Conservatives, for goodness sake, get way more views than he does. Nigel Farage gets way more views than he does. I get way
no
more
narrative.
Views.
I mean, they all have a simple narrative. Right. And I get that it's easier in opposition. It's always easier in opposition to have a simple narrative because it's largely whinging about something the government's doing. But, you know, I've been involved in Labour comms on and off recently because I've fallen out with them since they came into power, basically, because largely what they're expecting when they feed out information to anybody is propaganda. And I've said I don't do that. So
that's part of the problem. That's what they want people to do. They want people to go, oh, this is the message we want to push. It's like, no.
Look at how many potholes we've filled in this week. Go and do a tweet about it. And you go, fuck off, basically. It's not going to work. I'm still going to take the piss out of the Prime Minister. That's the way it should work. But the point is, give me a narrative to bite into. Give me something to disagree with.
What's happened in the last week or so. So we've had, they have massively improved the number of appointments people are getting in the NHS. They've reduced the waiting list.
2 million extra.
One of the big things, which would be absolutely massive, this is like half the population, halving domestic violence against women, or violence against women in general, actually, is the policy. So they've now rolled out domestic abuse experts in 999 call centres in some police forces, with the aim of rolling that out across the whole country by the end of the year. So that was one of their things. Where's the mention in the news?
Where's Jess Phillips?
She was there. She was trying to promote, but like, there's the mainstream media aren't asked about it because Trump's way more entertaining, and but Labour weren't given any reason for the media to talk about it. They need to realise that they need to kickstart a lot of these things. The media. Some of the media are just outright hostile to them, but not all of them. Some of them just want the clicks. They want clickbait. They didn't get behind Nigel Farage 10 years ago because, oh yeah, we're really into anti-immigration stuff. It's because he was entertaining. You know, they were giving them stuff that's interesting or shocking or for whatever other reason people will click on it. So they need to start that themselves. They need to do their own thing. They need to take social media seriously. They need to think of it as direct access to population. I'm going to keep picking. Oh, I can't look at
if Rayner was allowed to be more AOC, basically, then I think that would be a strong line for them. If you could have Angela talking like she does,
she appeals to
like a
people,
normal human being, basically, and almost challenging Keir, you know, sometimes. I think she's got the most powerful position in the Labour Party because she's the only other elected cabinet member.
Well, she can't be removed by Well, she can remove from Secretary of State positions, but not.
But Starmer can't get rid of it. Yeah,
not from the cabinet. No.
Yeah, and you know, I'm not saying she needs to find the same role as John Prescott, but she needs to find a role that works in the social media space, that is supportive of the government and its agenda, but brings the body, the non-body politics, the people that are not like you and me that read and watch all of this stuff every day. It's the people where, is there a news headline? And if Farage has gone out and wore a pair of wellies and stood in the channel for 5 seconds, that's going to be a news headline compared to somebody announcing a 20% reduction in domestic violence, you know. And again, it's not even the 20% reduction in domestic violence. That's part of the narrative problem, isn't it? Because that's we've managed to reduce this by 20%. And most people don't really have a concept of what that means. Just say, we've got rid of a bunch of cunts that were beating up their wives.
Exactly.
You know, that's what Farage would say. It is somebody saying it in the Labour Party.
That's what I mean. They just need someone, because he listens to advice. Like, he's not one of the. He's very opposite to Tony Blair in so many ways, and one of them is Tony Blair would just think a thing was right and he would go with it. Whereas Keir Starmer, sometimes it means he's slow to announce things. He likes to get, like, even this announcement on the defence boosting was apparently because he wanted Rachel Reeves to be approved rather than him just laying the law down. And and actually some good might come out of that, because she, I gather, was insistent that the Treasury have a say over things in future, because the MOD's procurement is a mess and it's a disaster. But anyway, he listens to people. He just doesn't have anyone who knows how to present a message directly to people.
Phil, can I just agree with Benjamin? I think I just dropped the C-bomb, and I'm really sorry. I've just taken Wayne's crown, and I'm sorry, Graham. Happy birthday, mate. I've just demonetized you. I'm sorry.
Never mind. Jovian made up for it. But it's... Chris is there saying, Angela Rayner is not well liked by a lot of my elderly neighbours. They think she's a hypocrite for buying a council house, then changing the criteria for right to buy.
Again, you see, that's just the simple narrative of the Daily Mail, but right? Also, because that story has got no hypocrisy in it, really.
No, but nonetheless, she is, and it's not because she's ginger, but she is like Neil Kinnock. He described himself as Marmite, and this was a problem with against John Major. And it's the same thing. She is, like, she wouldn't be an effective leader of the Labour Party unless there was, like, no one better. Because, yes, she does. There's a lot of people who don't like her, but there are a lot of people who really do like her. So it's not like
she appeals on
her.
I don't think she appeals to the same people, but she appeals on the same level as Nigel Farage, very much like AOC in the States, who is not being groomed for higher things in the Democrat Party because the elders and supposedly her betters are saying no. But she can take on Trump face to face on social media, and she energizes her base, you know. And whether Angela's not capable of that, I don't know. You know, I've got a little part of me that thinks that she should be released to do that.
You wouldn't just have her. There's other people who come across well as well. David Lammy comes across well. Ed Miliband, I mean, he's got a lot better. He used to be rubbish.
Yeah.
He's a lot better in terms of the way he comes across now. So they have got people who can do that. If it would do no harm if Rachel Reeves did some of that as well, because she's
Yeah.
the serious banker all the time. But actually, she has got a personality.
She
So,
she actually follows my Twitter account, so
oh,
she
shit,
must be
okay.
good.
But no, she has a personality. So you could just get her on talking about things that, and just get them out of their box a little bit and just communicate
Yeah.
directly with people. And it doesn't
There's a
even,
whole
they don't even have to have those people do it. What they could do is they could get a couple of people who are just one person who knows how to communicate and another person who's good at the tech stuff, and just get them to run the YouTube channel. And it's self-funding. Yeah. I get enough money to pay two people's salaries.
I think it's a curse of Labour in general, and it's where you need the leadership that demonstrates it for you, basically. But the politicians speak that takes over. That I can't say anything. Don't get me on Brexit. Don't let me talk about this. Let me just say that fundamentally, I've said this before, and Keir Starmer this and Keir Starmer that. Instead of just having a conversation about it, look, it's crap at the moment, guys. We get it. We all remember that the Tories spent all this money. Now, we got to work out our priorities, and I'm here to listen. Tell me what your priorities are. And that's what we need, a conversation with the voters again, basically. Yeah. That Farage is incredibly adept at.
This is why, again, I don't get it, why they're not hammering the NHS. It's like, because this is the problem they had, actually. So when the NHS figures came out, they did actually try. They put out a couple of videos, they put out a couple of tweets, but it got no real traction because they're not on a daily basis building up that audience that tunes into them every day, because they don't understand that you have to be engaging. Engagement's more important than your message.
Yeah.
If you are engaging, you weave your message in.
And I think there's a lot of blame to put on Wes Streeting's door there. I find him a turn off in terms of his communications about this. Basically,
as soon as he's very clever. He's on top of his brief and all the rest of it, and some of the stuff he's doing is right. But when he was made Shadow Health Secretary, I mean, I said at the time on my own channel, I thought, really, like almost anywhere else, because he's very divisive unnecessarily. He's unnecessarily combative.
Yeah,
and.
Takes on the wrong fights, and he takes them on too vehemently. The whole trans thing is a bloody nightmare, and he shouldn't be doing that, basically.
But
actually, somebody, Rustin Ho in the chat is saying, Phil, I spoke to Darren Jones a couple of days ago about social media use, and he's saying exactly the same thing. Apparently, things are in motion to change. Darren is one of those people that I think is
there are a couple.
Pretty good at this.
The thing is, though, you say there are things in motion to change. So here, and I've said this before on this channel, I'm going to say it again. So as far as I'm concerned, there are three types of social media expert. If you want to get on my channel, and Labour could be way bigger than I am, of course. I'm a recluse. I'm an introvert. I don't do a lot of networking.
Stop bigging up your Bumble profile there, Phil.
But I have hundreds of thousands of unique accounts just in the UK watching my stuff every month. Right.
Yeah.
That's hundreds of thousands of vote. I don't get. You have an age breakdown. It's not non-voters. It's voters, and over half of all my viewers are over 55 years of age. So they're key voters, right? Labour could have that in spades. And here's the thing. So they need to be talking to experts on social media. If they think they have them and just need to adapt no, they don't have them. There are three types of social media expert. The first type is someone who has actually built up their own platform from scratch themselves, so they clearly know the process because they've succeeded. The second, and I mean a bit more than 20,000 subscribers on like YouTube or similar amount on Twitter, so I'll be in a proper platform. The second type...
you're in a different category. I'm all right.
The second type is an academic who has interviewed 1,000 successful creators and asked sensible questions and distilled from them the common features that work and the ones that don't. And the third type is someone who works on social media engagement by working for that platform, and therefore they sort of do the same thing as the academic but from the other side. If you're not in any of those categories, you're not a social media expert.
No,
and my problem is, it's like when I was a teacher many years ago, in a college, and the IT teacher left He retired. He didn't like disappear in a cloud. He just retired. And they needed someone to teach the GCSE IT, and they got me to do it. I'm a physicist, right? I had no qualifications in IT. They got me to do it because when anyone had a problem with Word in the office, I was the one who sorted it for them.
You could fix it.
So, and that's what Labour have. And I don't want to be rude to them, but that's what they have. They have people who talk a good talk on social media because they know more than the person who hired them. But if they cannot claim to be in those categories, they are not a social media expert. What Darren Jones should be doing is talking to someone like me without like trying to pick myself up. They should talk to someone who's done it.
There should be some forum for all of us to talk to the party, to be honest with you. And I think that's what Graham has struggled to try and pull together over time. And we should be doing more of that because it's not about... I don't want to do propaganda for the Labour Party any more than the next man. You know, my job as a satirist, as I see it, is to poke anybody that decides that they want to be in charge of me and the country. I'm a bit gentler on the Labour Party than I am the other parties, but, you know, I still have a go at them if I think they're getting it wrong. But what I would like is to be heard and give advice on how we shape the narrative. And, you know, it's quite... In the States, it happens all the time. There are conferences for influencers that the Democrats and the Republicans run all the time, with speakers that can share information about how to make your social media work and give you government insight into what they're trying to achieve, and then listen to the audience talking, you know, the audience of people, as you say, that either make it or study it or do it, and get advice on how to do that best. And then the Labour Party then isn't even having to run its own social media. It is just communicating with us on a level that means that we can actually...
I think they should run their
own messages across for them.
Yeah, but I do think they should run their own. Rustino, I was just actually said that I was talking about getting current left-leaning YouTubers involved to advise. They're already talking to Politics Joe and aiming to talk to others, as far as I know. Okay, well, we'll see.
Yeah, no.
But, I mean...
It should happen, and I hope it is. And you know, we'll all be pissed off if we don't get the invite, basically.
It's not a case.
It should happen.
It's literally... All I would need to do to them is just show them what I've done with my channel and show them some basics. Like, it wouldn't be me saying, you need to do this, this, and this. It would just be me showing critiquing their own platforms and saying, this is why this does not work. This is why Keir Starmer talks about a thing and gets 1,000 views. I talk about Keir Starmer talking about a thing and I get 40,000 views.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and there's a reason for that. And they need to understand it. And they also, I don't think, because my worry is that they look at their crap views and they look at the Lib Dems crap views and they look at the SNP's crap views, and Plaid's are non-existent. And they think, well, people just don't watch progressive political parties on YouTube.
No, but Phil,
watch you because you're boring.
Yeah, and that's fundamentally the problem is, if you want to find out about what's going on with the energy crisis at the moment, you're not going to go to the EDF YouTube channel and watch some of their promo films. You're going to go and find an economist who understands exactly what's happening in that marketplace, or a physicist that understands why we're not generating enough renewables. And I think that fundamentally comes down to what they need to do, which is that they need to start a dialogue with the infrastructure that is there of progressive voices, because that's exactly what Trump did in America, and it's exactly what Farage is doing in the UK. You know, it's often said on the left that we need our own Joe Rogan. You go, well, okay, maybe we do, but what we certainly need is a network of people who are progressive leaning, that when it comes to elections can make a difference. Yeah. But they might be making videos about yoga for the next 4 years, basically, and not really touching on politics too much, because that's what's worked in the States. The right have gone off and said, we need some influencers in this space who don't bore people to death with politics every day, who don't actually, you know, it's not... I'm not knocking it, but your audience, my audience, are people that are engaged and interested in politics. And to get beyond that, you need to be able to talk about other issues. You need to be able to have other shows. But then occasionally it comes up to election time. You go, hey, you know what? Keir's done a good job, hasn't he?
But I would also say, even those... So if in a month, if I've got 400,000 unique individuals in the UK watching at least some of my content, those 400,000 individuals will... Okay, some of them don't like me. Some of them watch me for punishment. But most of them are approving of what I do, echo chamber and all the rest of it. They then go and talk to family, friends, colleagues about what I've said. I have people tell me that one of the things I do is present things in a way that they can then talk to others about. So
Absolutely.
you imagine the reach that I potentially have indirectly, and
Yeah.
Labour could have much more. You know,
You put
they
40,
could, they
50
could,
people in that position together
yeah.
and give them enough information and some resource, basically.
But again, I think they should do it themselves. I think they should do their own thing,
Yeah.
make an engaging channel, and because like if you when you talked about like physicists stuff like that, so if you look at the people who are popular on YouTube presenting science-based stuff, right? They're not sat there with a lab coat like a teacher at the desk that I would do. They're in like they. You can look at like Neil deGrasse Tyson, people like that. You know, Bill Nye, the science guy. All these people. There's an Australian woman I watch. I've forgotten her name now. It's all like it's normal. They come across as normal. They've got a normal setting. You know, they've all got PhDs coming out of their arse, but they've got normal settings. It all looks normal, like it's just someone talking to you about these things. And what Labour do is all the corporate bollocks, and that you don't do that. And it came out, like YouTube did a big study really recently, and one of the big things, and they did brain scans and everything just to find out what engages people, and one of the top things was authenticity. So when you do your shareholder video and put that online, the public don't go for it's not authentic.
Nobody
it's
believes
contrived.
Yeah. I keep seeing an advert on YouTube at the moment. Almost every video I ever watch has got this advert in it, and it's something to do with real talk with Accenture. And you go, look, the limited amount I know about Accenture is that they're a consulting company that works on huge government contracts, etc. It is not going to be a friendly chat show about anything other than aren't Accenture great? Basically, it's not for me, that thing. It's just, and I'm just never going to click on it for that reason. And that's one of the things that they get wrong. And like you say, it's one of the reasons the Labour Party get it wrong, because their videos should be a source of things for us to talk about.
Yeah. Well,
but it should put it out there into the network that says, okay, here's some things for you to talk about. And
if I was running Labour's YouTube stuff, what I would be tempted to do is be a bit like a tabloid. I would get a human interest story, and the video would be about that human. It wouldn't be about Labour, wouldn't be about the Labour government. It'd be about that human interest story, that interesting thing. So and so, this is the thing they've got, and in that video, every little point woven into it would be how the Tories caused the problem, and then how Labour are fixing it, and then in a few years' time how they fixed it. But the video itself, that would just come up once or twice. The video, or even in the human interest story.
And I think this is the way to move away from the propaganda. We fall into this trap of if you're in government, you can't complain about our society or our country or the way it works or anything else, basically. And if you're in opposition, that's all you do is complain about it all the time. So I think we need a better way of talking about these things so it is believable and honest, which is the government being able to say, look, here's the money, here's how it works, this is how much we're paying on pensions, this is how much we're paying for the NHS, this is how much we're paying for schools. You tell me, where are we going to get the money from for the thing that you want me to do? Basically, let's have a dialogue about it. And we haven't got all the answers. Rachel Reeves hasn't got this genius book of how to solve all of these problems. Yeah. They're all complicated issues that need discussing, and we need to get feedback from everybody to work out what is going to work and what isn't. Like you were saying about making cuts to DWP, making cuts to winter fuel allowances, etc., is easier. But once you get that conversation out there, it's a way of talking about the difficulties of government spending, which, you know, fundamentally are just always going to piss off opposition. And they always sit there being able to say, our country's going to the dogs. Yeah. You can't say that when you're in government, but you could definitely bring up some of the issues that are not resolved and say, okay, guys, how are we all going to do this together? And I think that's what's missing in the Labour narrative that I think was there in Blair's narrative, which is how are we all going to do this together? That's the line I'd be taking if I was Labour, is come on, guys, America on this side doesn't like us. We fucked off the Europeans, all right? This is us. We are going to, it's almost D-Day mentality or blitzkrieg mentality. We've got to fix this. We got ourselves into this situation. Let's get ourselves out. And you don't hear that. I don't hear that from anyone. No. I just hear accountants telling me they can shave 2% off this budget and improve the number of appointments that they can.
Yeah.
But I think you know the other thing is that if you look at it longer term, they hit the ground running. They are doing the necessary bureaucratic administrative things to fix problems that the Tories just didn't address, and shoveling the money around in the right places to go towards the things that will affect people directly. And in 2 years' time, like today, there's talk of a new GP contract and an announcement about the fact the government has done a deal that says that the 8 o'clock rush for appointments is going to change, that you'll be able to book your own appointments online using simple government systems. That's long overdue. I mean, listen, I'm somebody that's experiencing the health service on a daily basis at the moment. And the frustration of going back to your IT stuff, that 5 different apps I have to use just to find out the result of a blood test or make a repeat prescription request or get an appointment to get some ointment from somebody is ridiculous. And that needs fixing. When it does get fixed, and it will take a couple of years, everyone will notice that. And then we've got to keep telling the story that we did it.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
This is what we did for you. Do you remember how crap it was trying to get an appointment?
And the government do have to do that, because otherwise people just think, oh, my local GP did that. They won't see the link with the government unless the government based about it.
Like Badenoch's been doing today, trying to take the credit for the Trump conversation yesterday, basically, by saying, well, that was my idea, and that was my idea, and that was my idea. I'm glad the Prime Minister listened to me. You think he didn't listen to you? He said so clearly he wasn't listening to you. But if she gets the right soundbite out there, they can say it. If Farage gets a soundbite in 2 years' time that says, well, I made a small speech about this in Clacton once, and now all the GPs are giving you appointments just like I asked. Basically. Yeah. It's easy to do it if Labour forgets to get it right. Yeah.
But anyway, we've come to the end. Look at that. So thanks very much, everyone. Don't forget to click the like button. Graham likes that. And subscribe if you haven't already. If you were trying to type in the chat and you couldn't, it's because you're not subscribed, you see. Or he's banned you. I don't know what you did. You probably know what you did. But thanks very much. Thanks to Mike for coming on. Have a great rest of day, everyone. Happy Friday. And until next time, I'll see you later.
Thanks, Phil. Goodbye, everyone.
They're gone. Oh.